Good afternoon, and welcome to the Bovine Banter podcast with Penn State Extension Dairy Team. I'm Angela Breneman, Dairy Management Educator based in Lancaster County, and today I'll be your host. According to a study that was done at Purdue University in 2022, 8 out of 11 accidents on the farm involve manure storage facilities, and 8 of those 11 accidents were fatal. As spring quickly approaches, so does manure hauling season. So today we have John Williamson from Team Ag, and he's joining us today to talk about manure pit safety or any type of manure storage safety. So thank you, John, for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Angela, for inviting me to this podcast to talk about manure pit safety. As our audience of dairy producers is aware, there are many kinds of manure pits, and most common are lagoons, which can be concrete type structures. They can be clay or earthen lagoons, and then also the HDPE lined lagoons. So each kind has different safety issues and concerns. Um, Then we also have to take a look at the safety implications on how the manure gets to these storages, sometimes through gravity flow manure transfer pipes, when manure is scraped into a reception pit and then pumped to a lagoon or a solid separator or digester. Well, each dairy is different, and its manure transfer and storages are all different, and they'll all have different safety concerns. On the other hand, all dairies are family operations with children wanting to see what mom and dad are doing. Or the children may have their own friends visit on the farm. So dairies also want to make sure that the children are safe around the manure storages.
Yes, that's an excellent point.
Yeah. We all know that things happen in dairies and manure systems can have a blockage. All kinds of boards or all kinds of things can get stuck into a pipe and then requires someone to be put into a dangerous position to fix the problem. Maybe the pump is backed up. So you've got to be ready to fix a problem, whatever that might be.
Yeah, those are all really good points, and I'm excited that you're here to talk with us today about it. Spring is right around the corner. So we are going to see a lot of farms spreading manure here shortly. So over the years with Team Ag, what is the number one mistake that you typically see farmers make on their dairies or on their operations regarding manure pits and safety?
Yeah, I would say there are probably two of them. One is, and the most dangerous is entering a confined space, and that would be like a reception pit or a manhole. Um, um, which is confined, and it's not necessarily the actual storage, but it's where there's very little ventilation,
Hmm.
and there can be trapped gases in that, and that's where there's been most fatalities. The other one would be just a general one where these manure storages, um, the fencing and the lock and the gates aren't necessarily locked and prevent people from getting in.
Okay. So in terms of confined spaces, and underground manure storage, what are some safety precautions that should be taken, before someone enters these confined spaces?
Well, before entering a confined space such as a manhole or reception pit, you cannot do this alone. You must have a second person or more, and the person should wear a harness or at least have a rope tied to that person who's going in. Ideally, you should have a gas meter that's going to tell you whether there are dangerous gases, but a lot of times, I think most dairies don't have these gas meters. Um, but at least have a gas-powered leaf blower, which can really blow lots of air back into that confined area. I know like one farm carries one in the back of their pickup truck. Um, but yeah, those would be the things, they're very dangerous. You can't assume that, you've already gone in they're into this confined space before, nothing's happened, I can go to do it again. That's not necessarily the case. The gas can change based on temperatures, based on what's happening inside the barn, the diet of the cows as well.
Yeah, that's really good. I like the leaf blower idea. That's a really good idea.
Mm.
Um, so if we think about different types of manure storage here, what do you think are three safety concerns about lagoons?
Yeah, I would say probably the first one. Let's talk about the circular concrete tanks that would be next to a barn where the manure is um, um, scraped into the barn. But like during the winter, which we've just experienced, it was really cold, and a lot of times then the manure will get frozen right by the push off, and so they can't push any more manure into that pit at the push off. So then they look for another place where they can use a skid loader to dump manure. And so we're aware of accidents where a skid loader will go to another part of the storage and lift the manure um, in the bucket over the fence, but these skid loaders aren't designed for that. And there've been accidents where the whole skid loader uh, goes right through the fence and falls into the manure pit, and that has caused the fatality that we're aware of.
Yeah.
I, I would say the next one is just maintaining the fence and having a locked gate to make sure that children and cattle can't get in. And then probably the third one is that drowning can occur whenever a person falls into a pit. These HTP lined manure storages are very slippery. And if, let's say, a worker is controlling the weeds near the fence, or cutting grass by the fence on the inside next to the slippery HDPE liner, an accident, he could slip and fall in, and then it'll be very hard, very difficult to get out because it's such a slippery slope. So it's really important that you're not doing this alone. There would be another worker right there doing the work with that person. But also that it would be good to have a flotation device and a rope in case someone has to get out real quickly.
Yeah, those are all really good points. Lagoons, when I think of a lot of manure safety issues, I've seen a lot of incidences over the years with lagoons. We actually had a friend of ours who was snowmobiling up in New York, and actually ended up with his snowmobile in a lagoon because the farmer did not have it fenced off properly, and they were right next to the trail. So thankfully,
Wow.
he was okay, but yes, you are absolutely correct. It is so important to have them fenced off, have signage there, making sure
Right.
that everyone aware where the lagoon is. That is such an important tip.
Yeah.
Um, so what would be some of your greatest tips or your biggest advice for farmers when working around manure storage of any kind?
Just like you said, it's important that the fences and that there's warning signs are in place. And the fences are regularly maintained. Some of the concrete storages have been around for a number of years, and I've seen these fences starting to rust and not able to do the job they're supposed to do.
Mm.
So they should be repaired or at least replaced. Um, but the other thing is that always expect that the gases in the storage and possibly around the storage, especially when it's agitated or emptied, that there'll be these harmful gases. Um, and then also be concerned with in the confined areas, and don't be overconfident. I guess one of the things that's important also, if in a dairy, is if you see someone who's unconscious due to asphyxiation, our instinct is to jump in and rescue that person. Um, we've had, unfortunately, um, some very unfortunate accidents where several people are trying to rescue the person who's become unconscious, and then they also blank out. So it's just really important to have that leaf blower um, available right away. Get air into that confined space, get a rope and a harness and get call for help right away.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good point. You try to help someone, but you end up hurting yourself as well in the process.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we talked a lot about gases so far today and how harmful they can be. I know when I'm talking to producers on farm, we talk a lot about gases in terms of if we're talking about bedding types and that type of thing. We talk about gypsum a little bit. So explain to us a little bit about the gases that are generated from manure storage and why they're so dangerous.
sure. Probably the one that's most dangerous is the hydrogen sulfide, which is toxic and poisonous, but also carbon dioxide, which will deplete the oxygen that's there. Ammonia is also another gas, and that's more corrosive, and then also methane gas, which is explosive. Um, One of the worst things about these gases is that it depletes the oxygen. The oxygen level in regular atmosphere is around 21%. But if that oxygen level drops to 14 to 17%, it will impair our judgment, make us dizzy, give us fatigue and collapse. So, having a meter that can measure the oxygen level before entering a confined space is really important.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I just want to reiterate again, these are all naturally occurring.
Right.
So, just by having manure in storage, these all will naturally occur. So,
Yep.
just all things we have to be careful of when we're around manure storage.
Right.
Um, and we use things a lot on the farm that are really great at helping us in terms of our management and in terms of cow care, but sometimes they're not so great in terms of safety and farm safety. So a big one that I run into a lot, especially when we do milking evaluations on farm, or if we have guys that are trying to control their somatic cell count, is gypsum
Yeah.
in terms of bedding use. So, what can you tell us a little bit about gypsum and what happens when you mix that with manure?
Yeah, is a real problem. I understand it is helpful for the bedding and, like you said, for reducing somatic cell count. But what happens, especially in a manure pit where you have gypsum in the bedding, let's say especially at this time of the year, where you've formed a crust and those gases are trapped. And then when you agitate the pit, that crust gets broken up and the gases are released. So it's really important that everyone stays at least 25, 50 feet away when the pit is being agitated, so that people don't inhale the gases. And one thing I also have heard is that sometimes children are around and children's are breathing at lower heights because they're
Mhm.
shorter,
Yep.
and they could be succumbed to that hydrogen sulfide gas, whereas the adults aren't. So it's a very dangerous situation, and dairy producers need to be aware of that. It's highly recommended that manure haulers and dairy producers with gypsum bedded manure use a gas meter.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point about the children as well. Sometimes I don't think that we think about that they can be a little bit more susceptible than what we can to that. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, I would also like to add that there was a really good article that Professor Eileen Fabian from Penn State and also Dan Hofstetter wrote about gypsum bedded manure and the safety involved with that. So if people want to Google that, that would be really helpful. And also give suggestions on what gas meters to buy. But usually these gas meters just cost a couple $100,
Mhm.
and I would definitely recommend that manure haulers and those producers with gypsum should have a gas meter.
Yeah, yeah, no, thanks for that. That's a really good point. And if anyone can't find that article on Penn State's website, any of the dairy educators would be happy to give that resource out. So just give us a shout. So we know kind of the dangers of manure storage and what we should do. But what I like to usually recommend is for producers to have a plan in place on what we should be doing in terms of safety, and then what's going to happen if something does happen when we have an emergency. I always like to have a plan. So if you're in that moment of time, you know exactly what we need to do and what should be done. So, John, we see lots of different farms in our day-to-day life. What have you seen in a rescue plan that you think should be in there, or some things that maybe might not have to be in there?
Actually, to be honest with you, I haven't seen any rescue plans.
Okay.
And I agree with you. They should have them. And I haven't been asked, but I assume that a lot of dairies would have these. First of all, I would consider what are the possible accidents that can occur and how can those accidents be prevented. Um, and then regularly checking for equipment. Do you have a harness? Where's a leaf? Is there a leaf blower in the pickup truck? Um, gas monitor? Those kinds of things, just regularly checking on that. And then be sure if an accident does occur, you call 911. Um, but if you're going to need to rescue someone, you want to ventilate the space, get more help, use a harness if you need to rescue the person. And then also, it's important that people on the farm know how to do CPR because you'll want to, if someone has drowned or can't breathe, you want to clear out any obstructions, do CPR, and until the emergency service comes.
Yeah, that's really great. We do typically, you talked about calling 911. Typically, the local fire department in your municipality would come out. And depending on what area of, the state you're in or whatnot, I've seen different, skill sets of different departments. And I encourage farmers especially to work with their departments, and seeing what type of training they're doing, especially in the agriculture sector. So is there anything in particular that you recommend that producers should be checking with their fire department, in terms of training that they have for manure storage rescues? Mean, I was really encouraged when I came to your farmer chat last
Yeah.
Monday at the fire company, and they had a plan. They had a plan. They were able to talk to us about how they can rescue people from grain operations or grain bins. They had talked a little bit about manure safety. So I love seeing fire municipalities that have a plan. But is there anything that people should be checking with their fire department in terms of training, to be aware of?
I think it's a great idea, and dairy producers want to have a good relationship with their fire companies. Um, I would say visiting them, and then checking to see if they have gas detectors, but also what kinds of training they have done, and being aware of what kinds of accidents or what kind of um, fire situations that could happen. Having a full discussion or a meeting with the fire company will be very beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. So it's great that we have, I love having protocols. I love having a plan. And I feel like a lot of time on dairies, we have a plan for everything, right? We have
Yeah,
biosecurity plan. We have, the farm animal welfare plan. We
right.
have SOPs for, feeding calves or milking cows or lots of things. But I always tell my producers, if we're never opening that plan and we're never reading that plan's not really helping us. So, how often do you think we should be training employees or family members or anyone on the farm who's working around manure storage about manure safety?
Um, First of all, I think anytime you hire new people, you want to go over the safety concerns, and um, but I would say annually as a minimum,
Hmm.
or more often is fine. Just I know, some dairies, will have like a safety moment at each meeting where they talk with their employees some type of safety aspect on the dairy. And just to include that, if you're having these monthly meetings, that's really important. Maybe you want to talk about manure pit safety several times during the year.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely, I think, yeah, if when I agree with ever the new employees, everyone needs to be aware of protocols and
Hmm.
safety measures. Um, so looking at manure equipment as well, a lot of times some simple maintenance can prevent some of these accidents and can prevent some emergency situations from happening. So how often would you recommend that we should be servicing our manure hauling or our manure equipment?
Well, all equipment have specifications that tell that explain when required maintenance is required and how to go about doing that safely. Um, those are fact sheets that often are given to the producer when the equipment is provided to them. Um, I would say, yeah, just following those specifications, but maybe taking a peek at it, on rainy days, downtime as well, just to be well versed on what's required for maintaining this equipment because it is it's a huge investment, and you don't want that equipment to break down or malfunction that will cause problems.
Yes, yes, totally agree. We have to make sure we're maintaining equipment as well.
Yep.
Well, John, thank you for chatting with us today. You gave some really great points on how we can stay safe this spring season with manure hauling and in through the summer. I really like the leaf blower idea for getting in some oxygen. That is an excellent idea, and it's a relatively affordable way
Hmm.
to add some safety to your toolkit, your on-farm toolkit. So I really like that idea, so thank you. But if anyone has questions on manure storage safety, you can either contact myself at the Lancaster Extension office at 717-394-6851. You can also find articles on the Extension website, as John had brought up, and that email address is extension.psu.edu, or ask anyone on the Penn State Extension team, and we'll be happy to help you. If you'd like to get in contact with John as well, you can also contact me, and I can put you in touch with the TMAG team for any of your manure storage questions or nutrient management questions as well. And you can join us for next Tuesday on Bovine Banter for more discussion on farm safety. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Yeah, thank you.